Great. And we are now recording, and that's a great reminder that because this is being recorded, please be mindful in terms of if you're choosing to turn your camera on or off, and please be mindful of anything that you choose to share or any comments that you're making either in the chat or verbally with us during our time together. Thank you. Great. And thanks for that introduction, Kathleen. We're really glad to be here with you all. For some of you, it's a second time. For some of you, it's a first time. Let's see here, Kathleen, I'm going to make you a co-host so that you can keep an eye on the folks that are in the wait room, if that's okay. So you should be able to see that. And we're going to go ahead and share a deck with you today, but we have many handouts also to share with you today. So again, you're going to get a tidal wave of information. And after today's session, you'll be getting the deck. You'll be getting several handouts that Alejandra and I think are going to be most helpful for you. And as we get started, just want to start off by mentioning that this is not benefits planning. We are not benefits planners for you today. So this is meant to be overview information for you to help give yourself a foundation to make better decisions in benefits planning for you or your loved one. And today's session is not a substitute for actual benefits planning with a benefits planner. And Alejandra and I have some resources for you that we'll make sure to give to you so that you can reach out and get specific case benefits planning after this session. So, and we're also happy, we'll make sure that you have our email addresses too, so that you can email us if you have general questions that we can help with or provide more information. Okay, great. So let's get started. Great. All right. So I'm Sheridan Nicolau with the California State Council on Developmental Disabilities. As Kathleen mentioned, glad to be here with you all today. I'm the regional manager for the Bay Area office. And Alejandra, would you like to say hello?
Hello, everyone. I'm Alejandra Hacker from Community Resources for Independent Living. I'm the HR coordinator there, and I do benefit counseling as well. Thank you for having me today.
Okay, so a little bit about our plan today. We know we have some folks that have met with us over Zoom a couple of weeks ago for Medi-Cal and Medicare overviews. But for those who are first timers with us today, we're going to talk a little bit more about CRIL and about the State Council on Developmental Disabilities. Then we're going to focus on giving you that foundation. So, you know, about Social Security and SSI specifically. We'll touch on some of the other programs that people sometimes get SSI confused with. We'll kind of go into what is it, what the program offers, eligibility, getting started, how to best use it, and some troubleshooting and some resources. Then we'll shift gears and we'll talk about IHSS and what the program offers, eligibility, same thing, how to get started, common troubleshooting, and some advocacy and resources here. So Alejandra, do you want to kick us off and tell us a little bit about Community Resources for Independent Living?
Yes, so CRIL is a community-based organization. We provide services to people with disabilities and seniors throughout Southern Alameda County. We have a variety of different programs to help people live independently. If we don't have the resource in-house, we can help you find the resources you need to live independently.
Great. And I'm so thankful for Alejandra's partnership for this two-part series. It's been a lot of fun. So the State Council on Developmental Disabilities, we are established by both state and federal law as an independent state agency, and we ensure that Californians with developmental disabilities are guaranteed the same full and equal opportunities for life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, really the same as all Americans. And we work on this through a couple of different buckets of work. So first is through advocacy. So as a part of that, we do systems navigation, training and support, kind of like what we're doing for you all today. We'll do individual technical assistance. So you can reach out to us over the phone or through email and get some of that. We provide trainings for agencies and for professionals, as well as for family advocates and self-advocates. Another bucket of work that we do is capacity building. So that's everything from providing sponsorship or grant funding for promising practices or new initiatives that are helping reach some of our overall goals for the state of California. We also serve on a lot of coalitions and committees and advisory groups to be able to give consult and to support the work of looking at those, not just promoting best practices, but also discovering those promising practices, what's going to make life better in all areas of living for people with developmental and other disabilities. And then that last kind of bucket, we do a lot of systemic change work. So that can be anything from policy change, policy reform, legislation, either on a local level, county level, state level. We look for what needs to work better in systems. As you all know, as advocates and family advocates, there are many systems that are both disability specific as well as general that any of us use here in California. And these systems don't always play well with one another, and they're not always easy to navigate. And so we're always looking at how can we make sure that systems are working, and how are they working specifically for people with developmental and other disabilities and their families. And then the State Council is also responsible for data collection and for community engagement efforts, specifically for the National Core Indicators Project and for the Movers Longitudinal Survey here in California. Those are two very important projects focused on quality of services and the transition from institutions to community living. And our work really is in partnership with you all, Californians with IDD, with other disabilities, family advocates, professionals that serve them. It's important that we work hand in hand with you so that we can make sure that we all can receive services and supports needed to thrive and to actively participate and be meaningful participants and members in our community. So thank you for your partnership. Many of you here today have partnered with the State Council or with my Bay Area office of the State Council in different ways over the years, and really appreciate that work. All right, so I'll kick us off. We'll start off with some definitions. And by the way, I think I gave this disclaimer when we were together for Medi-Cal or Medicare. Some of the stuff might feel a little dry to you, but our goal is we're kind of building a map, okay? Building a foundation or building a map, and this should give you some of what you need to dive in deeper for your particular or your family members' particular needs. So what is Social Security, right? So let's start at the very basics. SSI specifically is funded by the US Treasury. It's administered by the Social Security Administration. SSI, as you all know, stands for Supplemental Security Income. It's a financial benefit, both for children and adults with disabilities that have limited income and limited resources. It's strictly a financial benefit so that the person can help pay for basic needs. Certainly for any of us that have been on SSI or have loved ones on SSI, we know that's not sufficient to be able to live comfortably in California or in most states. So it's really meant to help provide for those basic needs. And if you have Social Security, SSI specifically, you're also automatically entitled to Medi-Cal. And there are a variety of categorical variations. So I'm just gonna list those because there's quite a few different, you're gonna get some numbers from Alejandra and I, but you're not gonna get tons because it's so specific as to what category you fall under for a variety of benefit programs. So for example, if we're thinking about supplemental security income specifically, okay, here's the different categories that you could fall under. You could be a single person with an independent living status, a single person with a non-medical out-of-home care, a single person with no cooking facilities in an independent living status, a single person living in a household of somebody else, a single person who's the disabled minor child, a single person who's a disabled minor child in the household of another. So that's one block of different categories. Then you have categories for aged and disabled couples. So that could be aged and disabled couples in independent living statuses, or age or disabled couples living in a household of somebody else, or age or disabled couples that are non-medical out-of-home care. And then there's for folks that are blind, so blind person with an aged or disabled spouse. So there's a few categories there. So a blind person with an aged or disabled spouse, independent living status, living in the household of somebody else, or in out-of-home care that's non-medical. And then the last couple of categories are for people that are living in a Medicaid facility, so in a Medi-Cal funded facility, either a single person or a couple. So you get the idea that there's quite a lot of categories, even just with the basics, you know, what category do you fall under for your supplemental security income? So before we get too far into supplemental security income, it's oftentimes, it's very common that people get confused about the other programs that are administered by the Social Security Administration. So we're going to cover those briefly, but we want to make sure you have that because that's important to know. Also, as you're doing benefits planning or you're looking to apply for benefits, you'll have a sense of other benefits or other programs that you might want to take a look at for yourself or for your loved ones. So we just covered SSI, and that's what we're going to spend most of our time about for the first half of this training. So federal program, giving cash benefit to people who have disabilities and have low income and resources. You don't have to work in the past to get SSI, right? So Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI, that's a federal program also. Gives cash benefit also to people with long-term disabilities who qualify either because they used to work or they have family members who worked and paid into that system. And then there's state disability insurance. And boy, my office, in fact, gets a fair amount of calls sometimes for people that are looking to apply for state disability insurance and have questions. And we're not the right office for that, by the way, but we make sure to get them to the right office to get their questions answered. So SDI is a state program that gives cash benefit for 1 year or less to Californians with disabilities who worked before becoming disabled, right? So that's a state-focused program, so a little bit different. So you might be able to qualify for more than one of these programs at the same time. So, you know, for example, if you become disabled, you might get SDI, state disability insurance at first, and then later you might start getting SSDI. And if you get SSDI and also have low resources, low income, you might qualify for SSI, supplemental security income as well. So, you know, this is, you know, you want to look and see what benefits you get. You want to know for sure what benefits you get if you get benefits currently. And then you may want to consider what you're applying for. And some people have more than one, as we mentioned. So a little bit about SSP. Are you sick of the acronyms already, guys? So SSP is the state supplemental program, okay? So this is funded by the state, in our case, California's general fund. Also, sometimes you'll see it referred to as GF, more acronyms, right? It's administered by the Social Security Administration. It's a state program that provides a small supplement to people that are receiving SSI. And it's using the same criteria, so it's going to come together. You'll kind of get it together. So for most people, the maximum possible SSI benefit, including their SSP, is $954 and change for an individual, and $1,598 and change for a couple. The SSP portion specifically, it's here in California right now, it's $160.72 for an individual, and it's $407.14 for a couple. And those differences in terms of your total amount that you're getting are a little bit different if you are blind. So the maximum, all those together, for somebody who's blind, if they're an individual, is $1,011.23. And if it's a couple, then it's $1,749.19. So, and by the way, there's plenty of places that have the up-to-date amounts. So we're not going to spend too much time going through the specific amounts, especially because these change, of course, little bits at a time. So again, state supplemental payment is the program that augments Social Security, supplemental security insurance. So both SSI and SSP benefits, right? They're both administered by Social Security. Eligibility for both is determined by the administration using the federal criteria. And not all states have it. There's just a handful, but California is a state that has SSP. So SSDI Title II. So just a little bit more about that. Again, we won't spend too much time, but just so that you know, so it's the program that provides cash benefits to people who are disabled and have either previously worked and paid into Social Security taxes, or is the child or the spouse of someone who paid Social Security taxes. Okay, so you'll see it referred to in that way. And for SSI and SSDI, you know, in terms of how they work together, because as we mentioned earlier, some people have both of those programs. SSI is intended to be a program of last resort, right? To cover some basic expenses for people in need. And so that's why people have to apply for SSDI when they become eligible for SSI. So when you apply, you know, you're kind of looking, they'll look at your ability to receive either or both program. Because if you qualify for SSDI, you're going to be getting that first, or that's the first thing that they'll look at. When a person receives SSI and one of their parents retires, becomes disabled, or dies, the person oftentimes will switch from receiving SSI to receiving SSDI. So it's pretty important that if you are someone or you have a family member who is on SSI and their parent becomes disabled, retires, or dies, you want to make sure to let the Social Security office know of that change. And then, as mentioned before, a person can sometimes receive both SSDI and SSI. And here's where we're going to say it again. We'll probably say it a few times. Benefits planning, super important to do before you apply for benefits, and then to stay refreshed when you're on benefits. And please do consider speaking with a benefits planner. It makes a real difference to get some specific advice based on your or your loved one's situation. All right, so now we wanted to talk just a little bit about, okay, we know from, particularly if you were with us a couple weeks ago, Medi-Cal is kind of packaged with SSI and Medicare is packaged with SSDI. So we wanted to share just a little bit more about that, okay? So remember, in California, people who qualify for SSI, they get Medi-Cal benefits automatically. But as soon as you're approved for SSDI, because of your parent or that situation we talked about in the slide before, you want to contact Medi-Cal and let them know about that change. And then specifically, you want to let them know what kind of Medi-Cal that you will be on at that point. Minors who would normally be eligible for SSI as an adult, but instead go directly to SSDI as a minor, they can maintain their eligibility for Medi-Cal, but you have to make that communication, because they probably will qualify under another program. So, if you have free Medi-Cal and your income goes up, either because you're working or you make more money because now you have SSDI too, you might earn too much to continue to get free Medi-Cal. And if that happens, you might be eligible to switch to another Medi-Cal program. Okay, so there's multiples. We talked a little bit about that the last time. So you might be eligible to switch over to the California Working Disabled program. Medi-Cal workers, they're supposed to check automatically to see if you're eligible for another program. That being said, I would not just rely on Medi-Cal to let me know. You should ask them. I'm recommending that you ask them what program for Medi-Cal that you continue to be eligible for. And you might have to begin paying a little bit for your Medi-Cal coverage, but the amount that you would be paying would probably be a lot less compared to the income that you're earning or the increase in your SSDI. And if Medi-Cal, for example, says that you won't get free or low-cost Medi-Cal anymore because you switched from SSI to SSDI, if you can always appeal. You can file a hearing request. remember that if you're going to appeal a decision with Medi-Cal, and we're not getting too far into this because we're focused on SSI today, but remember you have about 10 days after receiving a denial or reduction if you want to keep aid paid pending, if you want to keep what you're getting until it's decided. Okay, and we won't get too much into hearing requests and appeals processes. If you want that information, we're actually going to give you a lot of that information in your handouts today, but we wanted to make sure you just knew roughly. So what you see on the deck here is the big picture to focus on. So, you might have to pay a higher share of cost. You may not have free Medi-Cal any longer, but you still want to find out what Medi-Cal program you might qualify for. And some examples are aged and disability federal poverty level Medi-Cal or California working disabled Medi-Cal. Okay. And then maybe we'll wrap back around to this. I'm just, in the interest of time, we may not look at all the handouts that you're going to get, but this is a great link. And this is the 2021 publication from the Social Security Administration. So it gives you, and they publish it every year, of course. So you'll get up-to-date facts, you'll get numbers based on the different categories. So all the different categories of SSI qualification that you may fall under, you'll see what those numbers are. You'll get some good resources. Generally, these sheets, they're pretty simple, and they also let you know about other benefits programs that you may qualify for, including SNAP, which is, food assistance in California, and it lets you know of some other benefits that you may qualify for as well. All right, I'm going to pass this on to Alejandra.
Okay, guys, I'm going to talk about eligibility for SSI. There's basic requirements: being age 65 and older, blind or disabled. And there's, as we talked about earlier, resources and income limits that they look at. For example, if you are a single person, you can have no more than $2,000. And for married couples living together, it's $3,000. To get SSI, you must apply for other government benefits and to see if you're eligible. You must live in the United States or Northern Mariana Islands to get SSI. If you're not a citizen, you may qualify. If you're a resident, you may still be eligible for the SSI program.
Yeah, and about income, the substantial gainful activity limits to keep getting your SSI and SSDI. For non-blind individuals, that's about $1,310 a month. Is that correct, Alejandra?
Correct. Yes, and it's especially important if you're working on the program. Great. That's why we would advise to discuss it with the benefit planner when you are thinking about going to work or going back to work.
Yeah, and I see in the chat, we will make sure that you have links of where you can locate benefits planners. And Alejandra, does Krill offer benefits planning, formal benefits planning services?
I do. So you can, we'll be giving out our information, and you can email me with questions, or we can set up a time to talk over the phone and start that process. Okay, definition of disability. This means you're unable to engage in substantial gainful activity, which is SGA, and you have a medical, physical or mental impairment that is expected to result in death or expected to last at least more than 12 months. So that's what they look at when you're applying for disability. And they have a list of impairments on the link below, ssa.gov. You can find a list to see the different criteria that they look at before applying for SSI.
Yeah, and that's so important because, you know, a lot of times we'll get people calling and saying, my loved one has Down syndrome or my loved one has autism. Isn't that enough? And it's like, well, you know, a diagnosis alone is not enough. You have to show how it impairs somebody, right? How it impacts their life.
Yes, and having the medical records, of course. A lot of people come to me, and I do help people apply, and sometimes it's not easy to get those medical records. So I encourage people to keep them in a safe place if they can. Okay, limits income and resources. What is not counted as income? The house you live in, one vehicle for transportation, a burial plot, the first $20 a month of income you receive, and then the first $65 a month from earned income. And these will, you can go over with the benefit planner too, to go over the SSI calculations, but they do, what is counted is other property, other that you don't live in, a second car, liquid assets in the bank, or other investments, 401k or retirement accounts.
Yeah, and sometimes you'll hear the acronym GIE, General Income Exclusion. That means the $20, right? That the first $20 is not a problem from non-employment income sources before the benefits are cut. And then the other acronym you might hear is EIE, Earned Income Exclusion. So that's that $65. So the first $65 of earned income, you're fine. And then after that, for every $2 you make over $65 a month, $1 is going to be deducted. Big message here, guys, is it pays to work. So, you know, particularly if you have a loved one and you're thinking, gosh, we don't want to risk their benefits, so maybe we shouldn't start talking about employment. No, please, employment is so good. Employment is so helpful in so many ways in our lives. So just get some good benefits planning, but know that in general, you're still going to make more working and with SSI than just SSI alone.
Okay, other common exclusions is household goods and personal items, medical devices and adaptive equipment, some life insurance policies, some burial and burial space, life insurance assigned to the funeral provider. Student financial assistance is excluded. And the ABLE account, this is a very powerful tool to use. Balance is up to $100,000. So they don't look at that as income if it's in an ABLE account. And that can be used, you know, if you're trying to save for education or maybe a home later in life. I really recommend looking into an ABLE account if that's something that if you're worried about counting income. That's a very powerful tool.
It sure is. I'm also super passionate, like Alejandra, about ABLE accounts. And if down the line you guys want an ABLE account overview, I'm sure Alejandra and I can work something out, but we can't say enough good things about ABLE accounts. So please look into it. It's so wonderful. And there you go. Balances up to 100K are excluded.
And the process for evaluation of disability of adults is, are you able to work? If not, what's your medical condition? Is it severe? they look at medical conditions on their list of impairments. And step 4, they do, did you work before, or do you have any work history? And step 5, can you do other work? Meaning, okay, you can't do the job you once did, but if there's something that's less physical, for example, you're not able to do the grocery store job of pushing carts all day, but can you work in an office setting? That's what they're going to look at.
Yeah, and there's a lot of micro steps or sub steps in each of those. So we're giving you just a high level, but we're also going to share some handouts that will talk more specifically about each single step. And remember, when you apply, your application is going through both SSDI and SSI, right? Because if you qualify for SSDI, you're going to get that first. Sometimes that confuses people because they apply for SSI, let's say in the case of an adult child with disabilities or a minor, and sometimes they'll first get that denial because the denial is SSDI first, right? And they'll say, oh, I got denied for SSI, and you got to read the fine print, right? So sometimes you'll get that denial for SSDI first before you get the approval for SSI. And, you know, speaking of that, Alejandra, like how often do people get initial denials? Is that pretty common?
That's pretty common, as you said. You'll get the denial for SSDI first at times, and then they could be delayed up to several weeks. So you might get calls, what's going on? So just be patient. But on the application, they do ask you on the online application, they do ask you, do you intend to apply for SSI as well? And there's a little checkbox. So make sure you are checking that box because it could delay the process.
Yeah, great.
We got a couple more questions about things, whether they might count against SSI benefits. So before we move on, maybe we could address those ones. They're in the chat box.
Sure.
One of them is, does a parent's 401k count against a disabled child's SSI benefits?
A parent's income.
Mm-hmm.
If the child, I believe, Sheridan, do you have any thoughts about that? I believe they do look at parents' income as well. But I'm not sure about the 401ks.
Yeah, they look at assets as well, but when it's parent-child deeming, we'll show a handout after the deck. We'll show you where you can get more information about different types of assets that a parent would have and what would count and what won't count for SSI. So hold that because we want to show you there's a variety of different categories there. So we'll show that. And then I also see in the chat, does money earned from workability, work experience program count? And again, there's different classifications, and generally workability, you're going to be a-okay, but we're going to show you information about that because it is important to run that through the calculator as well, so that you can make sure that you're fine. There's a couple of different programs and a few different ways that you can do work activity and work training programs, including workability. So hold that. We're going to show you where you can look specifically at that information.
Okay. The burden is a person applying for must prove to SSA that they are blind or disabled. And they must inform SSI about or submit all evidence that relates to their disability.
Yeah, I would say it's important to spend some time looking at that 5-step process. One of the handouts that we're going to share with you all, and I see the question here. So a child can qualify for SSDI if the parent is retired or if the parent has died, because the person is paid into the system. So, we can talk a little bit more about that as well. And then I see my son is 25 and still receiving 670 from Social Security. Yeah, those numbers vary depending on where he's living. If he's living with family, depending on, remember I mentioned all of those 20-something different categories for SSI, depending on who you are, your amount is different. But just looking at the amount that you have in the chat there, Brandon, it sounds like it's possible that your son might be living with a family member and getting some of his needs paid for by the family still. So it's important to look at these handouts we're going to share with you, because it could be that you're leaving money on the table because you haven't updated Social Security of your loved ones, where they're living, what their status is. So it's possible, or not, but it's possible that your son might be eligible for more Social Security. So the devil's in the details here, but we're going to make sure that you get the detailed information to be able to look up your specific situation. Okay, so make sure to look at that 5-step process and look at the list of impairments. Remember, these impairments, it's not just about a diagnosis, it's specifically about the diagnosis and the impact that it has on somebody's life per Social Security Administration. So, do that work beforehand. To make sure that you can have as much documentation that pertains specifically to that impairment list as possible before you apply, because it takes a long time to get a determination, and it takes a long time to appeal if you seek to appeal. So there's a lot there. So it's always better to take the time and make sure that you're submitting a full and complete application and as much of a package as possible the first time.
Okay, the age 18 redetermination, SSI will go through redetermination at age 18. For that, of course, this is an SSI program. So it's a part of transitioning to an adult. And there's a list of things that they will review to determine if they're still eligible for the benefit.
Yeah, and it's so critical that that big shift is they're not looking so much at the parents' level of eligibility. So I would recommend, what do you think, Alejandra, as somebody's getting close to turning 18, go on DB 101 and run some of the calculators, because
Yeah.
you want to know what you're looking at before you go through redetermination.
Yeah, so some of the steps with redetermination, you will receive a written notification from Social Security. They'll set up an interview. The Disability Determination Services will review all the medical records, the need, the living situation. Is this person not able to obtain SGA? They look at all these different factors, and the Disability Determination Services will review that. And then Social Security will notify you with the result of that review. Once you're approved, generally it's linked to a bank account. So if you don't have one set up, I highly recommend you set one up separately from other accounts. I know sometimes We share accounts, so it's easy to get confusing. So I really recommend to set up just a specific account for the SSI. It usually arrives around the 1st of every month. You can or that first week of every month. SSI is used for food, home, healthcare, and other living expenses. You must track. I recommend tracking all of your purchases and what it's being used for, due to Social Security might ask you for these receipts during a review. So I just keep a binder, make it easy, and keep track of where that income is going.
Yeah, and we can't repeat enough that any correspondence that you get from the Social Security Administration, do not wait. Open it, read it right away. Get help if it's not clear what it's saying. They're not exactly known for writing in plain language, right? but don't delay. Get some help understanding, because delays can really cost you. And I'm seeing a couple other things in the chat, and like I said, we're going to show you specific. It seems like a lot of questions are about parent deeming, right? So when your child is under the age of 18, how with parent deeming, how they might qualify for SSI. It's important to know that there are several categories in terms of the calculation for a parent deeming SSI application. Many of the parents' resources and income is counted, right? So you want to go through that very specifically. And then just so many kids that do not qualify under their parent-child deeming status when they're under age 18, once they do turn age 18, whether they're living at home and helping pay their share of the bills, or they're living outside of the home, then that's what Alejandro was saying earlier about redetermination. So now they're looking at eligibility based on your child as an adult, not on the parental income or assets. So it's a whole different calculation. So we want to talk about a few common issues, but we're going to show you some handouts later that'll go into far more detail, because there are so many categories, eligibility categories, and so many considerations in terms of, does this resource count or not count? Does this asset count or not count? Does this income count or not count? Whether your child is under 18 or over 18, it's important to go through these calculators. But in terms of what are some of the big picture common issues, so when you're applying, I would have to say the most common that I see is not providing enough information. And we mentioned this earlier, but it's worth talking to again, which is the decision takes a long time. This is not a fast process, but the date at which you apply becomes your potential eligibility date. So when you apply, you want that date to count. You don't want to have to be in a situation where you try to reapply. You don't want to do that. You want to give all the information that you possibly can with that application the first time around. You want to make sure to include contact information for doctors and specialists. You want to make sure that that there's no missing piece of information, and there's some really good checklists in some of the resources that we'll share with you. But just know your application can be denied because you missed a little bit of information. And FYI, any contact information that you're putting for doctors and specialists, make sure to talk with those doctors and specialists. Don't assume just because they see you or they see your child that they're gonna have all the information ready to share when SSA calls or emails them, okay, or sends them a letter. You want to make sure that you talk with them beforehand and say, hey, we are applying for SSI or SSDI. Here's a little bit about how my condition or my loved one's condition impacts them, how it impairs them. Don't make assumptions that your medical doctor, your specialist will instantly know SSA speak. They don't necessarily know that language. If you happen to have medical specialists that do speak SSA, bravo to you, man, but a lot of them don't. So don't make that assumption. You want to brief them and give them some make sure they have the language in your file or your loved one's file in terms of how their conditions are impacting per the impairments list. Okay, that's pretty important. And again, you know, I'm looking at a note I have here for myself, which is you want to make sure that, you know, when you apply, that date matters, because whenever the decision is made, you get your benefits paid back to the time that you applied. So you want to make sure when you apply, you have all the information, you're ready to go. Seeing Mary here says not provide enough info. Yeah, they can deny your application if it's missing information. Absolutely. Yes. These systems are not out. They're not going to call you and say, we think you might have forgotten a little something. Chances are you will not get that call. You will get a denial. You may not even get told why. So just, you know, get some help, have somebody look at your application package. It's not something to do quickly on your own. Get a little bit of help with that. Yeah. Okay, so let's see here. Comment. Okay, so here's another one. So let's say that you apply and it comes back and you have an unfavorable decision, as they call it. Okay, so some people who are denied SSI, you know, sometimes they're tempted, or maybe somebody says, well, just apply again with a fresh application. Please, you know, talk to a benefits planner. Again, we're not giving you legal advice or specific benefits planning advice for your case, but in most cases, you don't want to reapply. You want to appeal instead. So, you know, talk with a benefits planner, but in most cases, you're going to want to actually appeal rather than reapply. File your appeal within 60 days of the date on your denial letter. Because if you appeal and win, remember, your benefits go back to when you first applied, that first earlier date, okay? There's 4 levels of appeal, and you know, we could spend hours just on the appeals process. We're not going to. Remember, this is very high level today, but just to share a little bit. So a reconsideration, that's a complete review of your claim by someone who wasn't involved in your first determination. So SSA, the Social Security Administration, they're going to look at all the evidence that you submitted. They're going to look at the original determination and look at any new evidence. Okay, so that's what a reconsideration is. A hearing is kind of that next step. So that involves an administrative law judge who had no part in the original determination, and also somebody who wasn't involved in the reconsideration. And if you disagree with the determination made at the reconsideration level, at that first level, then you can request a hearing. Okay, and you can do that. You're able to do that online or through the mail. Then kind of that next step is an appeals council. An appeals council would review decisions or a dismissal made by an ALJ, an administrative law judge. The appeals council, they look at all the requests for review, but they might deny a request if they believe that that earlier hearing decision was supported and that there's no reason to look at it again, right? So an appeals council is only going to look at a case that they think might have merit or might need to be looked at again. And if they do decide to review your case, it will either decide your case itself, or they could always like return it back to the administrative law judge that originally looked at it for further review. And then kind of the last, and you know, this is just, you know, for some people that go through an appeals council and they disagree with the appeals council decision, or appeal council says, no, we're not going to look at your case. You can always look at if it's makes sense to file a civil suit in a federal district court. That's kind of your last, you know, the very bottom option there. And then I would have to say, Alejandra, just in my experience, I do see a fair amount of folks go through reconsideration. And then of course I do hear about people going to hearing. Is that common for you as well? What's your experience?
Yes, usually they do come to me with reconsideration, and usually that sometimes it stops right there, but people then do need to go further hearing, and have the hearing. Yes, it just depends on, each case is so different.
Yeah. So the last one that I wanted to mention, and then we'll move quickly. I know it's like we're trying to cram a lot of information in a short amount of time for you all, but I promise you, you're going to get so much stuff in your inbox. I mean, but really targeted stuff. You know, looking at some of the stuff in the chat here, this is going to help you with some of these specific questions. But I would have to say another common issue that we see is people that have SSI, they aren't quick enough or they forget to report income changes, work expenses, or changing in their living environment. And that's critical. You have to report these changes to Social Security. You need to report any of those changes to your local county social service agency in person, not so much in person lately, but usually by phone or email. You have 10 days to report the change. If you don't report the changes, you may have to pay back the overpayment. And that's the letter nobody wants in their mailbox, the overpayment letter, meaning, you know, you announced or we found out about a change in your income or a change in your living arrangement and you didn't tell us, or you didn't tell us on time. And so now there's overpayment.
I just wanted to mention too, if you're submitting documents to Social Security about the changes, I would keep a copy somewhere, because sometimes they say, I didn't get that. And then you have your proof.
Oh gosh, thank you for saying that, Alejandra. Guys, we cannot tell you enough. Keep detailed files, keep copies of everything. If you make phone calls, time, date, who you spoke with. I mean, really keep good records, because that oftentimes you'll end up needing that, and pretty important there. Okay, so for advocacy, big picture advocacy, guys, you know, Social Security, SSI and SSDI, especially SSI, tends to be at risk fairly often. It feels like we're always in some sort of a cycle of SSI at risk. You know, again, this is a low resource limit benefit. You know, recipients can't save more than, you know, 2,000 as an individual or 3,000 for a couple. You know, these recipients, they can't save for things like emergency repairs and property taxes and car repairs. I mean, thank God for the ABLE accounts that allows you to save for certain types of things. But aside from ABLE accounts, there are very few ways that people that receive social SSI that they can stay above water. So, you know, this is something that's extremely important that we don't lose. And from time to time, we see certain members of Congress that will kind of recirculate proposals that probably are very similar to proposals that have been circulated before, that are looking to make cuts to the SSI program. That also includes proposals that seek to further restrict eligibility or decrease benefits for things like food and housing. So, you know, please keep this in mind in terms of how important this is for so many Californians, especially Californians with disabilities. Some of the rules and the requirements haven't kept up with current economic realities. That's a nice way to say it, right? Is that this is it's a small benefit compared to cost of living, especially here in California. And rising costs for necessities like housing and healthcare, it means that recipients are pushed further into poverty every year. So there's, you know, some great advocacy organizations that we have in the deck that you can see if you want to get involved, both in protecting SSI, looking to increase SSI for people in need. So it's just something for you to know. There also tends to be some advocacy that goes on, specifically about increasing the general income exclusion, you know, making the amount greater than $20 from income earned or unearned, and then looking at increasing the earned income exclusion. So meaning, you know, people looking at, can people make more than $65 a month before they start getting money taken out of their SSI? So there's several advocacy efforts there ongoing. And then again, we're going to tell you again, and we're going to show you some handouts that give you kind of like cheat sheets for some of these things, specifically for benefits for young people. So focusing just on people under the age of 18 when it comes to SSI, looking at SSDI for minors, working different types of work programs, whether it's workability, other types of paid work. So we're gonna make sure you have the cheat sheets, and these are the specific links to the calculators, so that you can run those numbers specifically to look at how that work experience or that job or a parent retiring or dying, how that's going to impact somebody's Social Security, their SSI and or SSDI. Okay, so quite a bit there. In terms of other resources and advocacy, you know, you can reach SSA, the Social Security Administration, over their website. They have some services. They have a toll-free number. If you're looking at SSDI, remember that's a state program for individuals who have a shorter term disability that may or may not turn into a longer disability, state disability insurance. You want to contact the EDD department, the Employment Development Department. So there's that information there. All right, let's power through, guys, okay? And then I promise you're going to get more resources to be able to look at your specific questions. Let's talk about IHSS. Alejandra, you want to kick us off with IHSS?
Sure. What is IHSS? In-Home Supported Services is a state program run through the county. IHSS provides assistance to older adults and persons with disabilities to remain in their home safely. IHSS is administered by the county in California and for provision of home care workers hired by low-income, blind, aged, and disabled individuals requiring non-medical personal care.
Yeah, and it's important that IHSS, you know, it is the largest publicly funded non-medical service so that people with disabilities can stay in their own homes. So it's what you call an HCBS program, a home and community-based settings program. Super important, right? Because the big picture here, folks, if you didn't have a service like IHSS, you would have so many people just in California alone that wouldn't be able to safely stay in their home or with their families, would have to move to institutional or more restrictive care, which not only is sad for that person that they have to be in a more restrictive environment versus their home with their family, but it also means more expense for the rest of us in California, right? So when you talk about getting the most for your money and for your values, I mean, IHSS is such an important program for Californians and really for folks everywhere. That's my little plug. Sorry, I'm a fan, right? Anytime
It's
people
a
get to
great
stay in their
program.
homes and get the care they need, that's the whole, I mean, that's the whole purpose. That's civil rights in a nutshell, right? That people with disabilities should be able to live in their communities with the supports that they need to do that.
Yes, it's a fantastic program. The 4 different programs are community first choice opinion option, personal care services program, IHSS plus, and the IHSS regional programs. These are the 4 different programs.
Yeah, and most of the time people don't even know which they're in, and it really doesn't matter because mostly they're looking at what services they've been approved for, right, Alejandra?
Correct.
Yeah, so you won't necessarily look at which one to apply. You're going to apply once, and basically through the assessment process, they'll discover which of these programs you might qualify for.
What can IHSS offer? So they do domestic services for adults and related services such as meal preparation and cleanup, light housekeeping, assistance with laundry, cleaning, grocery shopping, and picking up medicine. Personal care, bathing, dressing, assistance with walking if needed, assistance with eating, transfers, bowel and bladder care. And they even assist you with going to the doctor, rides to your medical appointments, assistance with filling out forms if you need that service. So all these services are really, really useful. Paramedical services, if you require assistance with injections, wound care, they have this service as well. And then protective supervision for those with mentally, cognitive, and physically related impairments to keep them, safe. And more on the protective supervision. Recipients who are mentally, cognitive impaired, they need help self-directing, physical, basically to keep them safe in their home, to not harm themselves. And there's several requirements that they must meet. And they will go over that with you. The social worker will gather information and assess if this is something that they would qualify for. They would make a meeting with you, maybe visit you in the home to see and to assess the needs of the individual who's applying for IHSS.
Yeah, for any type of service for IHSS, you're going to get that home assessment. But for protective supervision, be prepared to do more, right? If you're looking at protective supervision for a child or for an adult, part of that is going to be like form, SOC 825, which is looking at, okay, if this person needs protective supervision, what does that look like in a 24-hour cycle? Because IHSS, is not going to be authorized for 24-hour-a-day care. So it's going to be looking at, okay, when is this person in school, or when are they in daycare, or maybe they're in a day program for children or for adults. They're going to look at what type of enrollments and waiver programs they might qualify for, or certain types of other care during parts of the day. So there's a lot of looking into somebody's schedule, whether they're a child or an adult, and somebody's looking at protective supervision. One of the resources that we're going to share with you over email, because it would take, it's pretty lengthy, but it's super good. Alejandra, tell me if you like this one. It's the IHSS manual from the partnership between Justice and Aging and Disability Rights of California. You familiar with that one? It's so good.
Yeah.
I love
That's
it.
right.
So
Great
we're going to make
information.
sure you get that link. Yeah, because and actually early on in that manual, it really starts to talk about protective supervision. There's a lot of numbers, there's some calculators, and there's a lot of assessment material where we can't go through all the in-depth parts today, but we're going to make sure you get that resource so that you can see if you think that a loved one you're caring for, if protective supervision might be something that you need and that might apply for.
I'm going to pop in just briefly and say that if you have any questions on it, please feel free to reach out to me anytime, because I have gone through it and my son receives protective supervision. So I'm familiar with all the documentation and whatnot, and I'm happy to help anybody who needs any help with it.
Oh, thank you. That's so important, Kathleen. Yeah, it's kind of a process, isn't it?
It's a very long process. I was lucky to have somebody else shepherd me through it, so I try to pay it forward now.
Yeah, good. And the resources that Alejandra and I are going to share, particularly the IHSS manual from Justice and Aging and DRC, really terrific. It's like, I don't know, 120 something pages, okay? But it's broken up into sections that are really helpful to go deep dive into, like, okay, let's look at all the things that social worker is gonna look at during the assessment. Let's look for the documentation that you will have to provide in the application. So it really does as much hand-holding as a guide can do, but nothing is a substitute for a friend or ally who's been there, done that, and can tell you about their experience. Yeah. So Alejandra, what about urgent services? Some people hear about urgent services. What's that about?
So urgent services are granted temporarily when a recipient loses a provider. This can be for just for the daily need, because they're going to need someone to step in and take over that. That's why it's so the urgent service. um, but a recipient must be in active status or not pending status. These services must be approved by the social worker and supervisor.
Yeah, and this is kind of an aside. So it's what I'm about to say is not urgent services, but I was just thinking of it. So with the COVID pandemic, something that became so critical for so many Californians with disabilities that use IHSS was backup, right? Emergency backup providers. And so you had both the California Department of Social Services, CDSS, and you had public authorities, really working very hard, sometimes in collaboration, but looking at, what are the needs to make sure that there are emergency backup lists of providers. Because if I'm somebody, let's say, who relies on my IHSS providers to get me out of bed in the morning, to get dressed, to go through morning routine in terms of eating and using the restroom and showering and all that stuff, maybe I count on all of that to get to my job or to work from home. If all of a sudden I have my providers that have tested positive for COVID, or who have family members that have tested positive for COVID or have been exposed, you can imagine how many people went through so much difficulty and in many cases trauma this last year, because all of a sudden they didn't have providers, sometimes with very little notice. And for many people, this is life and death. So anyway, that I just want to acknowledge what so many IHSS recipients and loved ones went through this year. And I want to applaud so many of the county departments, welfare offices, adult and aging services, social service departments on the county level, and the public authorities, and the state Department of Social Services that worked very hard to work on emergency backup lists of providers. Many times they also worked with regional centers too, just to make sure, if somebody also got regional center services, how do we make sure this person has their needs met while people around them might be dealing with COVID related impacts. It's a pretty big deal, continues to be a big deal.
Okay, who provides the IHSS care? Individual providers, including caregivers from IHSS registry. It could be a relative, a neighbor, or a friend. The public authority provider registry may assist you. And here's some information, the number. Recipients can choose a provider. Criminal background checks apply. Do you know, Sheridan, does IHSS perform these background checks, or does an individual have to do their own?
Yeah, so it's through the Department of Justice. Yeah,
Okay.
so it's going through the Department of Justice for that. That's who does the criminal background checks. And, really in terms of, recipients having the right to choose their provider, there's really only two main restrictions. So the person has to be eligible to work in the United States, and the individual has to be able to pass that background check. FYI, minors can sometimes work as IHSS providers. They're subject to restrictions under California labor law. They have to pass that background check, right? So there's all of that. But that's something that people tend not to know. And IHSS recipients, they are responsible for doing the interviewing, the hiring, the getting rid of the firing if needed. Yeah.
Okay, eligibility continued. Usually if you have Medi-Cal, you can qualify for IHSS. Qualified immigration status, California resident, you must live in a home, not a boarding care nursing facility or a hospital. Of course, the age, blind, or disabled defined by SSA. Evidence of need and gone through the assessment process the IHSS assessment process.
Yeah, and I see in the chat, questions about, if they have a loved one, a child, let's say, that's coming up to the age of 18. Yes, you're going to get, for some people, they get reassessed for IHSS every year. In certain instances, that can be pushed to, sometimes that can be every 6 months, or sometimes that can be a little longer. But it's important to, I'm looking at Haley's comment here. You want to be able to see with your child at the age they are now, if the need is there, apply now, but know that yes, there's going to be assessment changes as the person is about to turn 18. So just be prepared. And the IHSS manual is going to talk about that too, and some things for you to consider for your particular family situation. And sometimes what you'll see when you're looking at IHSS eligibility information, oh, this is important to know. An attorney shared this with me long ago, and I never forgot it. For IHSS eligibility, having your own home, that also can include if you are homeless and living in a car, or if you are homeless and living in someplace else. If you are not institutionalized, but you are homeless, that does not disqualify you from IHSS, FYI. Sad to say that we do have a lot of unhoused individuals in California, and it's important that they know that they are not disqualified because of being unhoused. Sometimes you'll hear about status eligible, meaning the applicant that receives SSI is considered status eligible for determining income and disability, age, so they get through that part. And then there's also income eligible. So that would be folks that are developmentally disabled deeming, the deeming waiver. So that would be an applicant that meets eligibility criteria for SSI, except that their income might be too high, but that they're under deeming. So there's a few particulars that you'll get some of that information in the manual so that you can look at how that applies specifically to you and your loved one.
Okay, there's some factors to consider. Able and unavailable spouse, a parent provider, age appropriate guidelines, as Sheridan, you mentioned this for the assessing needs of children. Need assessment performed when you first apply, and every 12 months after that.
Yeah. And then minor children who are deemed as disabled through SSA, once they're determined to be eligible by Medi-Cal or SSI, they are also potentially eligible for IHSS. In some situations, the parent's income or resources are excluded when determining eligibility. So this kind of goes also back to some of the questions earlier, but it's in some situations. I mean, here's where you really have to go through those calculators and read them and look through that section of the manual, because there's many, it's not a cut and dry yes or no in terms of what assets or income is included or excluded. But just so you know that in some situations, the parent's income or resources are excluded when looking at eligibility for IHSS for their child who is determined to be disabled by SSA. When we use words like disabled, we always mean in terms of what the Social Security Administration classifies, okay? So not just a diagnosis of some sort. Social workers, they follow an age-appropriate guideline when they're assessing the needs of kids. So a child can be authorized IHSS services that they would be able to perform unassisted if it weren't for their physical or their mental impairment as determined by Social Security Administration. There's other criteria too that has to be met in order for a parent or a non-parent provider to be paid for services. So you want to read that section of the manual there. And there are some services that recipients aren't eligible to get if they have an able and available spouse. So, there's definitions of what does able and available spouse mean. But if you have an able available spouse, you may not qualify for certain services for IHSS. If you have a child or you're a child under 18, no domestic or related services for those kinds of groups. So there's particulars based on your family makeup and who's available. I think we have some information also in terms of like if somebody works or not too. I think that might be next, or that might be further on. Did I skip that? Like maybe it's in the further on.
Okay, how to get started. You must have and demonstrate a need for the service for assistance. You can apply by using their form SOC 295. You will likely need to submit a healthcare form. This form is 873. This form, it has to be completed by the doctor and of course with their signature. Yeah, it's very important that your doctor fills out that form. A lot of times it's their assistants, but they can get it done. How do you apply? You can apply by going to the social services website, or by so you can submit the forms online or by mail or drop it off in person. Right now, I would recommend by mail or online due to COVID. After the application, there's a face-to-face assessment with the social worker, and that of course is by the county IHSS program.
Yeah, and what's interesting, something that it's important for folks to know, we mentioned earlier that they're looking at your household makeup too, as they're making that determination, because some of the services that they might be assessing you or your family member for might be prorated based on the number of people who are in the home, for certain things like meal prep or housework, that kind of thing. They're also looking at the physical environment in terms of like what resources you have at home and what you don't. So for example, laundry, right? They might allocate a different amount of time for somebody to get assistance with laundry if they have laundry like a washer and dryer in their home or in their apartment complex versus if they have to go downtown to use a laundromat. So those things really matter, and that's part of what that social worker is looking for when they come in to do an assessment.
Again, the face-to-face assessment is with the social worker. They view the living conditions, the social situation, and as you mentioned, time for tasks like the laundry. Is it done by going to the laundromat, or is it done by in the home? So those are the face-to-face assessments the social worker will go over with you. Are you able to prepare a meal on your own or not? They'll just go over your daily activities and see if you would qualify for how many hours you qualify for the assistance.
Yeah. And just like with so many other benefits, so after you go through the process, the application, you're doing the forms, your medical folks have completed their forms, you have the assessment with the social worker, you're going to be looking for that notice of action, that NOA, right? So that notice of action is either going to be approving or denying IHSS, and will break down if you're approved, what you're approved for. Then you're going to look at that notice of action. It's going to be provided in, within 30 days of the application, and you have the notice of termination or reduction in services, if that's part of your NOA, needs to be mailed at least 10 days prior to the effective date of the action, so you have time to appeal if you choose to appeal. And I'm seeing somebody asking questions in terms of Medi-Cal's tie into IHSS. Yeah, I'm going to quickly, we're going to go real fast, guys, because I want to get back. I want to finish the deck and let you know what you're going to get in your email. But going back to, yes, Medi-Cal eligible. So Medi-Cal eligibility is tied in with IHSS. So great. Okay, so what about, I get this a lot, particularly from parents or from family members that are saying, hey, maybe I want to become an IHSS provider. So, you know, if you're looking to be an IHSS provider, whether that's for your loved one or for somebody else, you know, as income, you want to go through the public authority, follow those instructions on how to be included in the registry. There's an orientation process, application, there's the background check. Public authority, by the way, that's a separate entity from the county department that's administering the program. They establish enrollment of IHSS providers. They provide the trainings, they maintain the registry, and they can also act as the employer of record for collective bargaining purposes as well. To be included on the registry, there's a few different things that you'll need. You'll need to be able to show your proof of right to work in the United States, ID, documentation and certificates for any trainings that you've had. There's a whole list, so we won't go into it. If some of the IHSS that you're providing has to do with transportation or accompanying people to medical appointments, you'd have to provide proof of current auto insurance policy and liability and all of that. So there's a variety of things that you would need to provide to the registry. And then specifically, if you're looking to become an IHSS provider as a parent, the assessment in the manual that we share and some information from DB 101, you can read more about this. But in the interest of time, we at least wanted to bring up, if the parent must quit a job or can't work full time because they're caring for their disabled child. Remember, when we say disabled child, that means according to SSA, right? The Social Security Administration. And if no other suitable care provider is willing and able, and if the child is at risk of out-of-home placement or inadequate care, that's some of the parameters. There are many more. So this is just the high level, but it's important to know that if you're looking to be a parent provider, there's a few things that you have to, that they're looking at in terms of the determination. And so you'll get some of those resources in email if you're looking at that. And then if both parents live in a home, one parent might be able to get paid if the other person is working in school or disabled. So there's a few different ways if you're looking at having an IHSS provider in the family, a few things that you want to look into. Particularly IHSS for a child from a 2-household family. So let's say if you have parents that are co-parenting and living in separate homes. So for parents of a child who's an IHSS recipient and they're living separately, but they share custody, let's say, of that child, the county assesses the child at the primary parent's home. And if one parent wants to be the child's IHSS provider, the county determines if that parent is eligible to be a provider. And if both parents are available to be the child's IHSS provider, the hours can be assigned based on the child's needs, based on when the child is in each person's home. So there's, again, a little bit more math involved, a little bit more worksheets involved, but anyway, that's very common. So just wanted to point out, like, there's a form for that, or there's some guidance for that. There's also the California Department of Social Services. That's the state department that kind of oversees and does the state administration part of IHSS. They have some letters. So from time to time, they'll put out letters to all the counties to give updated guidance or directives of some sort. Those are all available on the CDSS website. I think we put the link to that at the bottom of your deck. So you'll have that too. So you can read some of the guidance or the new directives that are going out to counties in terms of how they administer IHSS. Troubleshooting. So, I think we mentioned this earlier, but we have to say it again. Don't apply for benefits like this before you talk to and prepare your doctor or your pediatrician or your medical specialist. Don't assume that they will know what to do when they get these things mailed to them and they're asked to fill out these forms. You have to talk with them because it's not just about a diagnosis. It's about an impairment, how somebody's condition or diagnosis impacts their functioning in the household or in day-to-day life. So you want to talk with your medical team before applying so that everybody's on the same page. Use an assessment worksheet before a new or an annual assessment. And by the way, we talked about the manual that we'll share with you that's available from Justice and Aging and DRC. I think they have some templates in there that you can use. So, take a look at that, but that's really helpful to go through that worksheet before your assessment. Also, in terms of those notices of action, right? So after you go through that assessment, or let's say you already have IHSS, you guys know what reassessment's like. It can be a pain, but it always happens, even if it gets delayed sometimes. So, for example, there were some delays with COVID this last year, but, keep an eye out for any of those notices of action with any decisions or changes in what services they're offering. And if you disagree with any of those NOAs, you can request a hearing. And remember that, you in many cases have a good chunk of time. In this case, for hearings, you have 90 days. But if you want to, while the time that you're applying for a hearing, if you want to keep the services you have now called paid pending, aid paid pending, then you want to respond within 10 days. So that way you don't lose whatever you have in the meantime while it's getting worked out with your hearing. Okay. So that's important, timely response in that sense. We talked about public authority. So there's 56 of them. So just about one for every county in California, almost. They do have advisory committees. They work with their advocacy groups. They have public meetings. Most of them are quarterly. So you can find your specific one and get more resources. This is also the website here for CAPA, the California Association of Public Authorities for IHSS. And, I was looking at stats for them. So it looks like they serve over 600,000 IHSS recipients and over 500,000 caregivers, IHSS caregivers. So it's a pretty good resource in California. It's worth taking a look at and seeing what resources they have on their website. And then other resources here, we've talked a little bit, my federal partners, the State Council's Federal Partners Disability Rights of California, they have some really great publications on their website. Definitely check that out. DREDF, other partners of ours, Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund, terrific advocates also. DB 101, some of the handouts are directly from DB 101 that you'll get. And then Justice and Aging that does some wonderful advocacy, particularly around benefits in California. And then the Health Consumer Alliance, there's their website, that's a hot link there, as well as the 1-800 number. Can't say enough about that. Oh, and bear with us, guys. We're a few minutes over. We want to show you what we're going to send an email to, okay? But first, here's some information about benefits planning, okay? So you heard from Alejandra. Alejandra at Creel does benefits planning, okay? You can go if Alejandra serves Southern Alameda County, correct, Alejandra? Sorry.
Yes, correct. Sorry, I had myself on mute. Yes, Southern Alameda County. So,
and we know I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
Yeah, everything down to Livermore area, Fremont to San Leandro, of course, the Hayward area. And so just giving you an idea of our reach.
And so Krill is an ILC, an independent living center, but we know we probably have people from all across the state here with us today. There is an ILC near you. So if you look up your independent living center near you, you can find somebody wonderful like Alejandra to talk to you about benefits planning. These links here, in addition, this is a WIPA counselor, fabulous, right? These are work incentive planning and assistance counselors. I actually have a colleague who's finishing up her certification for this. Totally awesome.
And I wanted to say I was a WIPA before. That's how I got my certification.
Nice, nice. So very helpful, especially if you have a loved one who is looking at work and how work would impact their benefits. So can't say enough. Also, the Department of Rehabilitation has work incentive planners through them. So if you or your loved one is thinking about working and you are with Department of Rehab or you're looking at that, they have some great incentive planners. And then here's what I mentioned earlier, the California Department of Social Services, they're all county letters. So you can see like what's the latest around COVID and reassessments for IHSS, for example. You can read about that so that you're not blindsided there. And then recognizing people's time. You may have to leave right now, but for those that can stay with us for another couple of minutes, I want to share screen and show you what you're going to get in your inbox. How's that sound? Yeah? Okay. So bear with me. I'm going to.
I wanted to say one more thing too. Oh, you've got your screen up. I was going to say I'll throw it in while you're getting your screen up, but I'll say it after.
Got it. So one of the things that you'll get in the inbox is specifically for young people, for minors and young adults, all kinds of stuff that they and their family members are going to want to know about eligibility, insurance, working and benefits, what to do as you're gearing up to turn 18. I know a lot, it sounds like we have a few people with us that have loved ones that are about to turn 18. It talks about some of the key programs, how they work together. It goes into some of the stuff that we've covered in the last 2 sessions with you, but then it also takes you in some different directions as well so that you can read more, hear about. We had some people that were asking about parent to child deeming. So there's a section on that. We will also be sharing with you SSI, the basics from DB 101. So again, this gives you some of those numbers that we very quickly went through earlier on today, breaks down eligibility for the different programs, the definitions, all about work, right? Because in most cases, it makes sense. They give great examples. I love the examples in the case studies. I think that's always very, very helpful. Excluded resources, all of that. This right here, guys, is the IHSS guide, the manual from Justice and Aging and DRC. 123 pages of good stuff, people, especially if you, good stuff, right? How many times can you say that about benefits guides that are 123 pages? But truly, it really goes into some of those deeper topics that I know might be rattling around in your skulls right now, including a whole section on appeals and hearings, some appendix and some great worksheets, that kind of thing. And lastly, IHSS the basics from DB 101. So I know we ran over, but thank you for letting me share that. We will get that to your inbox shortly.
And I'll give my little 2-minute spiel here, only because I notice on the attendees list, I think we have some families with younger kids here. So I wanted to let you know, just from a parent perspective, what IHSS looks like when your child is a little bit younger. It's a little hard to get into the mindset because you care for your child because they're your child. So you don't really think about these extra things that you're doing because your child has a disability. So like my child is 9. My typically developing 9-year-old well, he's 12 now, but at 9, I could send him off to shower on his own. My child with a disability can physically do the showering things, but tends to turn the water up to scalding or, things like that. So he requires supervision. He's still in a booster seat and he requires me to buckle it because he doesn't have the fine motor skills. These are not things I ever thought of as a parent. I just do them because they're a parent. But when it comes to IHSS, they will ask you about all of these things and they will calculate the amount you receive based on it, with the idea being that you are compensated for things that you do for your child over and above what you would do for a typically developing child of the same age. So when you're thinking about it, if you're thinking about applying, I encourage you to just start jotting down little notes when it occurs to you, like, oh, for my other 10-year-old, I don't have to cut up his food. But for my 10-year-old with a disability, he's not able to do that and I do it for him. Just things like that go above and beyond. Just make little notes because it will help you when they come out to do the assessment. And that's it. That's all I want to say.
Perfect. Love it. Yeah, thank you so much. Guys, peer support means everything. So please lean on professionals and benefits planners and offices like mine, but also lean on each other. There is no expert better than the experts next to you in terms of parents and family members and people with disabilities that have been there, done that. So please just know that you have a community, even if you feel isolated. There's people that are looking out and care about you and your family and are willing to help you get the resources that you need. So thank you all, and we appreciate you spending your afternoon with us.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Sheridan and Alejandra. Thanks, everyone.